Namaste everybody, welcome back once again. I wanted to make a quick video sharing a little bit about Ayurveda and nature-based medicine in general, based on a few questions that I've been getting from people. People have been writing and asking me a little bit about what Ayurveda is, about what my definition of health is. Some of these questions coming from people who come from a very traditional, or I should say mainstream, Western medicine background. And this is definitely acknowledging the value that Western medicine has in our culture and where we are as a species right now. I think the two can complement each other really well. But I went ahead and just jotted down 5 ideas that came to me right away about what are some of the big differences between Western medicine and more nature-based medicines. I talk specifically about Ayurveda because Ayurveda is considered to be a complete science. It's around 5,000 years old, and so it's a science that acknowledges everything in existence, but I think the same can be said for a lot of what you could refer to as medicines from around the world. You know, it's really only recently in human history that our reality became, you know, the tangible world, the things that we can interact with our senses and see and touch and taste. But for a lot of people, a lot of cultures who are still very connected to old ways of doing things, very connected to earth, reality kind of transcends that dimension. And excuse me, about every day around 5 p.m. I have a lovely chorus of birds that like to come and compete with me. I think where we are at as a society, people are starting to open up to some of these ideas, starting to open up to some of these holistic ways of thinking. And for me, I think because the way that I was doing it and the way that I was doing my health wasn't really working for me anymore. It was not really getting to the root of what I needed. And so anyway, I have this list of the five ways that differentiate Ayurveda and nature-based medicine from mainstream Western medicine. The first is that it is a complete science. So, like I said, it encompasses everything in existence. And Ayurveda teaches that everything was made up of the elements, so earth, wind, water, fire, air, and ethers, which is kind of the more subtle element of reality. And so we're also made up of elements, the animals are made up of elements, everything in existence is made up of elements. And so it's not just about treating the physical part of us, but acknowledging, yes, that we have a physical body and also a mental body, that there's emotional components, that we store things in our body, and that we can use principles of nature and principles of bringing balance back to nature and to ourselves as well. Number 2, what I wrote is that it doesn't just treat the symptoms. So a lot of Western medicine will kind of look for a diagnosis, and we identify a lot with you know, our sicknesses, the diagnoses that we have, and we look for cures and treatments and often pills. But Ayurveda is not necessarily about just, you know, finding a symptom and treating that symptom with kind of an insta fix or a pill, but it's finding, okay, what is the elemental imbalance that's causing this symptom? And let's look at that elemental imbalance. Let's look at the root and bring balance back to the whole being rather than just chasing after these symptoms. Number 3 that I wrote is that it acknowledges all aspects of us. Yes, so once again, we are more than just our bodies, we are more than just our minds, even though that is the reality that we perceive to be the case. most of the time, that there's so many other layers to who we are. And I could go really, really deep into this, but I think, one thing that this is evidenced by is that oftentimes when you start going after a sickness, or I should say, when you start paying attention to a sickness, you start to find that that sickness has some kind of message for you. For me, learning about, I had food allergies for a really, really long time. At one point they said, you're allergic to every single food. You just aren't digesting well. And, the more I began to explore that and bring awareness to that, I was seeing that, it wasn't just food I wasn't digesting well, but it was life I wasn't digesting well. And kind of understanding where there were blockages in my body, and that kind of opened me up to bigger things in life, opened me up to different avenues where I could find more purpose, and kind of opened me up to some of the more spiritual aspects of life. So Ayurveda acknowledges all aspects of us, not just the physical layer. Number 4 that I wrote here is that health is a spectrum. It's not just the absence of disease. So a lot of times we're taught to believe that you go and see a doctor when you have a sickness, which is okay to do. But, taking on this new definition of health, that it's something that can always be expanded. It's something that we can always grow. When we begin to heal ourselves, for instance, when we begin to heal our traumas, our destructive patterns, our addictions, our relationships, that starts to have a ripple effect on all of the people around us. We even start to heal our children and the people around us and our ancestors. And so, you could say you could always be healthier, or you could always further your expansion as a human being. On the flip side of that, a lot of people can have a lot of really debilitating illnesses. There's in Ayurveda they say there's a spectrum of illness and when something can be considered treatable. And at a certain point, there are things that don't necessarily have a cure, or can no longer, the body has degenerated to a point where maybe it can't be reversed. However, it's more about making peace with everything, with every part of who we are, our sicknesses and our shadows included. So, we come into this life with whatever we come into this life with. I like to think that the more challenges, the more things that life gives us to look at within ourselves, whether that manifests as a pain or sickness or presence of disease, the more there is room for growth and expansion as a human being. And number 5 is that it takes the individual out of the role of victim. So nature-based medicine means that we are empowered creators of our health. We are empowered creators of our life. I played the victim role, and still often play the victim role a lot with my health and with my life. As I was saying, having that long history with food allergies and having a really hard time digesting things, I was always kind of blaming my body or the circumstance. Once I started to realize that some of those things had emotional roots, then I was starting to blame, events that had happened in my life or circumstances. But, ultimately, as I was saying, we come into this life with what we come into, and we learn to make peace with it. We learn not to try and fix, not to try and change, not to try and insta-quick, take something away with a pill, but to orient ourselves in the direction that we want to go with our health. So that puts us in the creator role, not the victim role. And it means that we always have a choice. We always have a choice in how we feel. The laws of nature mean cause and effect. I do this action and I feel this way. Or I make this choice and it affects my mind in this way. And so we'll get into all of that a little bit more. But know that you are an empowered creator, which is a really, really liberating, beautiful thing to know. Thank you, all of you beautiful people, for joining me. Namaste and blessings. I hope you're using this quarantine time as a space not to, keep doing the normal things, but using it as a space and time to bring gentle awareness to those areas of your life that were asking for your awareness and love. Blessing.